Imagine finding out that the person responsible for deciding your fate in court is secretly in love with you. Does it seem impossible? Well, that's exactly what happened in one of the most disturbing cases that have ever crossed the Brazilian courts. And what you will discover in the next few minutes will make you question everything you think about judicial impartiality. But before revealing how this story ended completely unexpectedly, let me introduce the protagonist of this real case that shook the judicial system. Dr. Helena Monteiro, 45 years old, a magistrate for 15 years, known for her rigidity and ruthless decisions. A woman who built her career on the pillars of ethics and impartiality, respected by colleagues and feared by lawyers. Helena had never even considered getting emotionally involved with anyone related to her lawsuits, until that Tuesday in March. On the other side of the court sat Marina Santos, 32, accused of tax fraud involving R500,000. Marina was no ordinary criminal. She had a degree in economics, a single mother of an 8-year-old girl. She had lost her job during the pandemic and made desperate decisions to keep her daughter in private school. Her hands trembled as she waited for the hearing to begin, not out of fear of arrest, but because she knew that her daughter was in daycare without knowing if her mother would return home that day. The first eye contact between them lasted only 3 seconds, but it was enough for something inexplicable to happen. Helena, who had presided over more than 2,000 cases, felt a disturbance she had never experienced. Marina, in turn, noticed something different in that judge's eyes. It was not the usual coldness she expected to find, but a spark of humanity. During the 45 minutes of the hearing, Helena fought against thoughts she shouldn't have. He watched as Marina bit her lower lip when nervous, how her eyes filled with tears whenever she mentioned her daughter, how her delicate hands contrasted with the harshness of her situation. For the first time in her career, Helena found herself secretly rooting for the acquittal of a defendant. Marina, even in her vulnerability, noticed details that other defendants would never notice. The way the judge softened her tone of voice when addressing her, how she avoided direct eye contact when the prosecutor presented the most compromising evidence, how her expression changed when the defense attorney mentioned Marina's financial difficulties. At the end of the hearing, Helena uttered the usual words about awaiting the sentence in freedom, but her voice betrayed an emotion that she could not completely control. Marina caught this nuance, and, for a moment, they both looked at each other in a way that neither of them could explain later. For the next 3 days, Helena was unable to concentrate on any other process. He reviewed the records of Marina's case dozens of times, looking for legal loopholes that could favor the defense. Completely atypical behavior for someone who had always prided himself on his neutrality. Helena found herself researching Marina's life on social networks, another act never practiced in her career. He found photos of the defendant's daughter, videos of simple birthdays, posts about financial difficulties that completely humanized that woman who should be just another lawsuit number. Marina, for her part, couldn't stop thinking about that judge. He researched Helena online, discovered academic articles she had written, interviews about the importance of social justice. She realized that she was facing a brilliant, dedicated woman who had sacrificed her personal life for her career. Marina began to fantasize about what it would be like to meet Helena outside the formal courtroom environment, what it would be like to talk to her about matters other than her guilt or innocence. The situation became complicated when Helena made a decision that would change everything. She decided to do something she had never done before, an unscheduled technical visit to the place where Marina claimed to have committed the frauds. Officially, it was to better understand the context of the facts. In reality, it was an excuse to meet Marina again. The meeting took place in a coffee shop near the accounting office where Marina had worked. Helena arrived first, nervous as a teenager on the first date. When Marina appeared, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, Helena felt her heart racing in a way she hadn't experienced in years. They talked for 2 hours about the case, but between the lines were charged with a tension that both recognized but did not dare to name. Marina told details of her life that were not in the records. Helena shared reflections on justice that revealed her soul behind the toga. When they said goodbye, Helena made the mistake that would change everything. She lightly touched Marina's hand and said she would do her best to make everything end well. Marina understood the subliminal message and, for the first time since the beginning of the process, slept peacefully. But what neither of them imagined was that someone had photographed this meeting. And this person had very specific plans to use this information. 3 weeks after that meeting in the cafeteria, Helena had already crossed all the red lines she swore never to cross. What started as an inconvenient attraction had turned into something she could no longer control. Every night after a whole day of judging cases, Helena found herself writing messages to Marina that she never had the courage to send. Marina, in turn, had developed a dangerous obsession. He discovered Helena's schedules at the court, the restaurants she frequented, even the way she was home. It wasn't stalking, she told herself. It was just curiosity about the woman who held her fate in her hands. But the truth was more disturbing. Marina was falling in love with the person who could sentence her to prison. The first contact outside the official environment happened in an apparently casual way. Helena bumped into Marina at the supermarket on a Thursday night. The initial conversation about organic products evolved into an impromptu coffee, which lasted until 2 in the morning. They talked about children, interrupted dreams, loneliness, everything except the elephant in the room, the criminal process that hung over them like a sword of Damocles. During this meeting, Helena revealed something she should never have shared. She was inclined to acquit Marina, not only because of the extenuating circumstances, but because she genuinely believed in her version of the facts. Marina was torn between relief and guilt. She knew that this privileged information was the result of something much deeper than professional sympathy. The meetings became regular, always in discreet places, always with elaborate excuses. Helena said to herself that it was only academic interest in the case. Marina convinced herself that it was gratitude for the understanding received. Both lied to themselves with impressive aplomb. Intimacy grew dangerously. Helena shared details about her career, the pressures of the judiciary, the loneliness of a powerful woman who had never met someone who was not intimidated by her position. Marina opened up about her fears, her genuine guilt for the mistakes she had made, her plans to rebuild her life after the process. It was during the 5th meeting that the inevitable happened. In a moment of vulnerability, when Marina was crying when talking about the fear of losing custody of her daughter, Helena hugged her. The hug lasted longer than appropriate, evolved into caresses, culminated in the first kiss that sealed the fate of both. From that moment on, Helena was completely committed. Not only ethically, she was madly in love with a woman who should judge impartially. Marina, in turn, discovered that responding to Helena's feelings was simultaneously her salvation and her damnation. The intimate encounters began the following week. Helena's apartment, always discreet, always loaded with guilt and desire in equal proportions. Helena had become a person she didn't recognize, lying to colleagues, altering her routine, living a double life that put decades of built reputation at risk. Marina struggled with even more disturbing thoughts. He began to question whether his feelings were genuine or an unconscious survival strategy. Was she really in love with Helena, or just manipulating the situation to escape conviction? The line between love and interest had become impossible to distinguish. The situation became complicated when Helena made questionable decisions in the process. He rejected requests from the public prosecutor's office for a new expert opinion, accepted as valid allegations of the defense that he would normally contest, created dubious legal precedents to favor Marina. Each decision was a step deeper into the ethical abyss he had chosen to dig. Helena's colleagues began to notice changes in her behavior. The rigid and predictable judge was making surprising decisions, arriving late to sessions, seemed distracted during important trials. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, Helena's judge and mentor for years, scheduled a lunch to talk about his professional concerns with the protégé. Marina also faced external pressures. His lawyer, Dr. Patricia Lemos, an experienced criminalist, realized that the process was taking unexpectedly favorable turns. During a consultation, he directly questioned whether Marina had made some kind of unofficial contact with the judge. The question left Marina in a panic. If her own lawyer suspected something, others could also be noticing. Their relationship has deepened dangerously. Helena began to make personal decisions based on Marina. She cancelled a specialization course in Portugal so as not to move away, refused an invitation to join a higher court, began to plan a future that included Marina and her daughter. Marina, in turn, postponed plans to move to another state, began to subtly introduce the figure of Helena into her daughter's life as a friend of Mom's. But what neither of them knew was that Dr. Ricardo Almeida had hired a private investigator to monitor Helena. The judge's suspicions went far beyond simple professional concern. He had information that could destroy not only Helena's career, but her entire life. And that information was about to be revealed in a way that would change everything forever. The bomb exploded on a Monday morning when Helena arrived at the court and found an envelope without an addresser on her desk. Inside, clear photographs of all his meetings with Marina, the coffee shop, the supermarket, entering and leaving Helena's apartment at compromising times. Along with the photos, a single typewritten sentence. "How much is your reputation worth? I look forward to your call." Helena felt the world come crashing down. 15 years of impeccable career, decades of dedication to the judiciary, her image as an upstanding magistrate, everything could be destroyed by those photographs. But what terrified her most was not the ruin itself, but what it would mean for Marina. If their relationship were exposed, Marina would be automatically convicted, regardless of the evidence in the process. No court would accept that a defendant seduced a judge without consequences. Marina received an identical envelope at home, but with a different message. "Your judge friend is not as discreet as she imagines, interested in negotiating your freedom." The phone rang before she even finished processing the information. The voice on the other end of the line was male, polite, dangerously calm. "Dr. Marina, I imagine you are surprised. I have a proposal that may interest both of them." The man identified himself only as someone who knows the backstage of the judiciary well, and scheduled a meeting for that same afternoon. Helena tried desperately to find out the identity of the blackmailer. He called contacts in the civil police, scoured his previous cases looking for someone with motives for revenge, even considered hiring a private detective, but time was against her. The sentence in Marina's case was supposed to be handed down on Friday, just 4 days later. Marina's meeting with the blackmailer took place in an underground parking lot in the city center. The man was elegant, appeared to be 60 years old, spoke with the precision of someone familiar with the legal system. He did not reveal his name, but he made it clear that he knew intimate details of Helena's life that only someone very close to him could know. "Your situation is delicate, Dr. Marina, but not impossible to solve," he said, arranging the photographs on the hood of his car. "Helena Montero has built an exemplary career. It would be a shame to see it destroyed by a moment of weakness. Don't you think?" The proposal was diabolical in its simplicity. Marina should publicly confess her guilt, accept a sentence of 2 years in prison, and in exchange the photographs would be destroyed. Helena would keep her reputation intact. Marina would serve a relatively light sentence. Everyone would win. Marina felt nauseous. She realized that she was being used as a piece in a much bigger game, but she also understood that refusing the proposal would mean destroying Helena. He asked for 24 hours to think, knowing that he had already made his decision the moment he saw the suffering in that man's eyes when he mentioned Helena's exemplary career. That night, Helena and Marina met for the last time in the judge's apartment. Both knew about the blackmail, both understood the implications. The conversation was charged with a desperate intimacy, like convicts sharing their last meal. "I accept the proposal," Marina said, holding Helena's hands. 2 years is a short time. My daughter will understand when she grows up. But his career, this you have built your whole life. I'm not going to be responsible for destroying everything." Helena protested, proposed desperate alternatives, flee together, face the scandal, sue the blackmailer for extortion. But Marina had already decided. He had discovered that he loved Helena enough to sacrifice his own freedom for her. What neither of them knew was that the blackmailer had made a fatal mistake. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, because he was the elegant man in the parking lot, did not imagine that Helena had installed a recording app on her phone after receiving the first threats. All conversations with Marina had been automatically recorded, including the one in which they discussed blackmail. On Thursday, the eve of the sentencing, Helena made the bravest decision of her life. It gathered all the evidence it had collected about Ricardo, including the recordings, the original photographs, which it had obtained through a contact in the technical police, and documents that proved his involvement in other cases of judicial corruption. On Friday morning, Helena did not pronounce the sentence in Marina's case. Instead, he did something that no one expected. He publicly confessed his emotional involvement with the defendant, asked for removal from the case, and filed a formal complaint against Ricardo Almeida for extortion, blackmail, and attempted corruption in the judiciary. The courtroom was in absolute silence. Marina, present to hear her sentence, was unable to process what was happening. Helena had chosen the destruction of her own career to protect it and expose the real corruption that infected the system. But the story was just beginning, because Ricardo Almeida was not a solitary corrupt, and Helena's recordings revealed a blackmail network that involved dozens of other magistrates. What seemed to be the end of Helena's career would become the beginning of something much bigger. Helena's public confession caused an earthquake in the Brazilian judiciary. Within 48 hours, the story was in all the newspapers in the country. Judge declares herself in love with defendant and exposes corruption scheme. But what the media didn't know was that Helena had orchestrated it all as part of a much more elaborate plan. Marina was acquitted by another judge 3 weeks later, when new evidence, coincidentally discovered after Helena's complaint, proved that the tax frauds had been carried out by her former boss, who had used Marina's data to cover up his own crimes. The real victim had been accused, while the criminal remained free and prosperous. Helena, as expected, was removed from her duties and faced disciplinary proceedings. But something unexpected happened. The recordings she had made revealed that Ricardo Almeida operated a blackmail scheme involving more than 20 judges in different states. The scandal was so great that attention was completely diverted from Helena's case. 6 months later, Helena received a surprising proposal to lead a new commission to combat judicial corruption, created specifically after the revelations of the Monteiro case, as it became known in the media. Her experience as a victim of blackmail and her courage to expose the system qualified her only for the position. Marina, free of the accusations, decided to use her experience for something bigger. She created an NGO to help people unjustly accused of financial crimes, especially single mothers in vulnerable situations. Helena became a volunteer legal advisor for the organization. The relationship between them has evolved in a mature and transparent way. There were no more secrets, no more conflicts of interest. For the first time, they could explore their feelings without the external pressures that had made it so complicated. But the story had one more twist in store. A year after the events, during a routine investigation into the files seized from Ricardo Almeida, Helena discovered something that completely changed her perception of everything that had happened. Marina had never committed the frauds for which she was accused. Evidence found on Ricardo's computers revealed that he had orchestrated the accusations against Marina as part of a plan to blackmail Helena. Ricardo knew about the attraction Helena felt for vulnerable women. He had studied all the cases she had tried in recent years, identifying a pattern in her more lenient decisions. Marina had been chosen specifically for her profile. Single mother, financial difficulties, appearance that fit Helena's type. The evidence against Marina had been fabricated, the documents altered, the witnesses coerced. Ricardo had created the perfect situation for Helena to fall in love with a defendant and subsequently use it against her. But Ricardo's plan had a fatal flaw. He didn't expect Helena to choose professional self-destruction rather than give in to blackmail. And he certainly didn't foresee that Marina would actually fall in love with Helena, turning a calculated manipulation into a genuine love story. When Helena revealed these findings to Marina, they were both silent for long minutes. Marina felt simultaneously relieved that her innocence had finally been proven and disturbed by having been used as bait in an elaborate trap. "So our meeting was never accidental," Marina said, processing the implications. "I was chosen to be his temptation." "You were chosen to be my downfall," Helena replied, "but he chose to be my salvation." The final revelation changed everything again. Helena was completely exonerated and offered to return to court with promotion. Marina sued the state for moral damages and won compensation that completely changed her financial situation. But the question that remained in the air was disturbing. If the feelings between them had been born of orchestrated manipulation, were they genuine? Did Marina really love Helena, or had she been psychologically conditioned to do so? Will Helena really fall in love with Marina, or will she just react as programmed by Ricardo? The answer came in a simple and profound way. After knowing the whole truth, after understanding how they had been manipulated, Helena and Marina consciously chose to stay together. The love that had been born from a scam had turned into something real, genuine, strong enough to survive the discovery of its artificial origins. 2 years later, Helena returned to the court as a judge, specializing in cases of judicial corruption. Marina expanded her NGO to the national level, becoming a reference in the defense of people unjustly accused. They live together in a simple apartment, raise Marina's daughter, have built a life based on total transparency. Ricardo Almeida was sentenced to 12 years in prison for conspiracy, corruption, blackmail, and dozens of other charges. But even from prison, he managed to get a last message to Helena. You two will never know if the love you feel is real or the result of my experiment. That doubt will plague them forever. Helena burned the letter without showing it to Marina because he had discovered something that Ricardo would never understand. No matter how love begins, what matters is choosing to feed it every day. And this choice, she and Marina had been making consciously every morning for more than 3 years. But sometimes late at night, Helena still wonders if Ricardo was right about something. If you've come this far, you need to know other real cases that will shake your certainties about justice and morality. Click on the bell so you don't miss our next videos, and leave them in the comments. Do you believe that love can be born genuine even from manipulation? See you in the next case.